Take some responsibility for yourself. Nobody cares about your safety or your money or your device more than you do. Well, hey guys, how you doing? We are just hanging out at an old abandoned amusement park. So we're just gonna go for a little flight, see what we can find, see what's still here, and just have a little conversation while we go for our flight. So before we take off our flight, we've already done our pre-safety checklist for everything on the ground, made sure everything's good to go. And so now we are gonna go ahead, get her up in the air. Got a little bit more wind than I was hoping for today's flight. We're just gonna go have a little bit of a look around, see what we got going on. So one of the things I wanted to talk to you guys about today was just a little bit about personal responsibility and your drone. So in the case of the Spark, you know, most of us have spent, you know, at least $500 for the Spark itself, and a lot of us spent basically $700 for the Fly More package, and then we've got batteries and all that kind of stuff, right? So I see in the forums all the time, I see in my comments of a lot of my videos about people talking about, oh, my Spark just flew away, oh, I just crashed. And you know, those are terrible events. You know, I've had one flyaway situation. If you go back and look at my videos, I'll put a link right here to it. But I've had a flyaway situation, and you know, going back now about a month later, maybe 6 weeks later, about 6 weeks later now, you know, with the benefit of hindsight and learning a bit more about the Spark and learning more about drones in general and such, you know, I can see what I did wrong there. And you know, so it's just one of those things that, you know, I was a lot like most new drone owners who've never had a drone before, and think, oh, I can just send it up in the air, I don't need to know anything, I can just do whatever I want. And DJI has implemented all kinds of cool protections for me. You know, the technology will keep me safe. And you know, that's not always the case. You know, technology is fantastic, and DJI has done a pretty good job in most cases. You know, they're not perfect, and I'm sure that they are absolutely responsible for a lot of the flyaways and crashes and such, and should bear the responsibility for that. But one of the things I had made some comments on a particular user who had a crash and a flyaway, and talked to him a little bit about chain of events. And you know, in almost every disaster, whether it's you know, an air-related disaster, whether it is a bridge collapsing, a dam breach, or you know, something like that, there's almost never, now I'm not saying never, but almost never, just a singular cause for that particular event to happen. It's generally a chain of events, and sometimes those chain of events include actions, inactions, bad decisions, you know, physical mistakes, mental mistakes, you know, but each one of those items is part of that chain of events that led up to that disaster. You know, almost every big disaster, not necessarily natural disasters, you know, hurricanes, you know, things like that, you know, or things that, you know, maybe a bit different, but, you know, what I'm talking about are, you know, like airplane crashes and bridge collapses, and, you know, a lot of those sorts of things like that. And I think that we have to bear some responsibility as to be part of that chain. Now, I'm not saying that for those of you who have had crashes or flyaways and have lost your drones, that you are 100% responsible. I'm not saying that at all. I certainly bear responsibility for some of what happened when I had my crash. Now, so that's something that, you know, I've got to take a look at and be honest with myself and say, okay, well, what could I have done to have prevented my flyaway? What could I have done to not let that chain of events occur to have enabled that crash to happen? And so that's all I'm saying, is that we need to look at ourselves and we need to think about, okay, well, what's our responsibility in the chain of events? Now, DJI has created some pretty cool software, right, that goes along with the Spark. When it's all working good, I think we can all agree that the Spark's a pretty amazing piece of engineering. Now, you know, it's far from perfect. It has its warts and has its problems, and you know, a lot of you guys having communication issues and a lot. So it's, you know, I'm not saying it's perfect. It's got, you know, a lot of its own problems, but I think that DJI really is trying to put out a good product. Now, but I do feel like we have to bear our part in that chain. So if you guys have ever watched the show Dirty Jobs here in the U.S., it's an American show. I know a lot of you guys are you know, from abroad, but we have the show that was on for several years. It's been off the air for a while. A guy by the name of Mike Rowe went around and did a bunch of different jobs. For a day, he would go and spend a day with you know, people in their profession, and you know, these were not glamorous jobs, but they were you know, jobs that needed to be done. One of the jobs, I'm not sure if this was part of his Dirty Jobs. That's where he kind of got famous, but he also is a narrator for a lot of other shows, such as some of the crab fishing shows and things like that, where they're up in the North Pacific by Alaska, and so my battery's getting down to about 18% here, so I'm gonna turn around and come back here. Not very far away, I'm only about 300 feet away. But anyways, so he was working on one of these crab boats up in the North Pacific, and you'll hear him tell the story on multiple different event places where he recounts the same story. But he came up with this concept of safety third, and it originally came to him. Let me go ahead and land the Spark here. So it originally came to him when he was on one of these crab fishing boats, and seas are just crazy, and it's just a horrible working conditions and unsafe. And he goes to the captain, says, "Man, when are we going to stop working? It is not safe out there." The captain looks at him, says something along the lines of, "Hey, I'm here to make you money. I'm not here to keep you alive. It's your responsibility to keep you alive." And he kind of had a kind of an epiphany, I guess, that, you know, really nobody cares about you more than you, and so you really need to be out there keeping track of yourself and making sure that you are safe. So that's kind of an extreme example, but I think it kind of relates to what we're doing with our drones here. Nobody cares about your drone more than you do. Nobody cares more about the $700 you spent on your Spark, or your $1,000 you spent on your Mavic, or your $1,200 or $1,500 or $2,000 or whatever you spent on your drone. Nobody cares more about that money than you do, and nobody cares more about keeping it safe than you do. And so, you know, I see comments, you know, about crashes and flyaways, and again, I'm not saying that you can prevent everything. Stuff is going to happen. You're going to have problems. And like I said earlier, DJI should bear some responsibility in that. But I think it also is incumbent upon us to make sure that we are being as safe as possible, and we are making sure that we're breaking that chain of events from occurring to get all the way to the point where we have a flyaway or we have a crash, right? So, you know, you hear propellers falling off. Well, okay, did you physically check your propellers before you flew? Okay, if you did and it still comes off, well, you know, you did your part, right? That's you know, maybe outside of your responsibility. But if you just had a horrible crash and you didn't go and check your propellers after that before you went and flew again, and then you have a crash where your propeller falls off, well, why didn't you break that chain of events, right? Now, the other thing is you know, if you're taking off in ADI mode before you get a minimum of like 10 GPS satellites, right? Before it gets a GPS lock, before it marks its return to home spot. If you take off before that, well, you're creating another link in that chain that could potentially lead to a flyaway, right? Well, if it hasn't marked its return to home spot, or it did mark its return to home spot, but it marked it in California and you're here, you know, you're in New York City, well, it tries to do a return to home. You see what I'm saying? So there's things you can do to go through that chain, to minimize, to try and break that chain of events. Now, again, that doesn't mean you're going to stop that chain of events, that you're ultimately going to be able to prevent it and stop it from happening, because stuff happens, right? We're in the real world. But I think it is incumbent upon us to do what we can to try and break that chain. Do some pre-flight checks, right? I have a video about it. It's not the most exciting one. It doesn't have very many views, but check it out up here, where you can, it lists out, you know, a whole bunch of things of what you can do. Physically checking your devices, virtually checking things. You know, if you're flying in an open sky, well, if you have a return to home setting where it goes up 100 meters on its way back on the return to home process, well, that's probably okay. But if you have a canopy of trees over you, that's probably not an appropriate setting. And so if you're not keeping that in mind in your checklist of before you go in the flight, well, okay, what are my return to home settings? And you just look really quickly, or you know what it's set at, and you leave it set at 100 meters and you have a canopy, well, you've created another link in that chain that could potentially lead to a disaster, right? Now, just leaving it there doesn't say you're going to have a crash, right? But doing that, plus your flying until your battery gets to 15% and it gets really low to the critical point, and it tries to initiate an automatic return to home. Well, you've just added another link in the chain, right? Where you flew it to the point where it is trying to automatically come back, right? And so all I'm saying is there's these links in that chain, right? And it's going to be different for almost every disaster, right? But there's generally a sequence. And so if you don't fly when it's in ADI mode, if you don't put it up in the air, well, you are not allowing yourself to get to that chain, that you're not adding to those links in the chain, okay? And so that's all I'm saying is take some responsibility for yourself. Nobody cares about your safety or your money or your device more than you do. So take care of it, right? It's much easier to spend an extra 2 minutes before you put your drone up in the air going through a little checklist. Even if it's just a mental checklist, it could be a 60 seconds, right, to do everything. It really doesn't take very long. And that video that I talked about that I have, it's a pretty long video. It's maybe 15 or 20 minutes. I don't remember. it takes a while to talk through all the different things, but when you do it in real life, it's like a 30 to 90 second process probably, right? And so is that extra 30 to 90 seconds that you take ahead of time to go through and make sure that everything is safe, and you're trying to break that chain of events that could lead to a flyaway or a crash, is that worth your time and your money to do that 30 to 90 second check up front? Or would you rather try and deal with DJI support, right? Now I hear some people say they've gotten great service from them and so on. I hear other people say they have nightmares, right? But you know, that's any company dealing with them, right? So you know, all I'm saying is sometimes putting a little time in up front creates or saves you a bunch of time down the road. You know, there's a saying out there: prior preparation prevents poor performance, right? And I hope that doesn't get me in trouble with the YouTube police saying that. But anyways, yeah. So take responsibility for yourself. Take a little extra time up front. Take some responsibility. Okay. Do some preventative measures to break that chain, and go and have a fun flight, right? So you can enjoy it. All right, guys. Hope I didn't scare you guys away on this one. It's a little bit of a serious conversation there. I'm sure I'm going to get some interesting comments down below. Hopefully we get some positive comments on it, but you know, if you got something to say, love to hear it down below. And if you're interested in the content we're putting together, I'd love to have you hit that subscribe button, subscribe to our channel. We're not all serious here. We have lots of other content, and we've got a lot more planned here in the future. So hope you have a great day. If you're not having a great day, make it a great day. Get out, explore someplace new, do something different, and take a friend or a family member if you can. All right, we'll catch you on the next one. See you.